Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Sweat Elite podcast. And in my opinion, this is number 25, also over on YouTube. Got a little rhythm going now with this YouTube channel and the new podcast. So for those that don't know, these podcasts you're listening to, if you're listening to it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, it is over on YouTube, but it's not on the Sweat Elite YouTube channel. It's on a new channel. If you type in Sweat Elite podcast, you'll find it pretty easily. But yeah, welcome back. Wow, plenty been going on in the last week. I've got a lot of stories to share. Oftentimes I think about things that happen, I'm speaking specifically to a pretty weird thing that happened with the US CIS, US government, and my ability to move around yesterday. Sometimes I think I shouldn't share these things, but then I think, why not? Just share it, who cares? I mean, I'm not going to risk any sort of issues entering and exiting by my choice of words, but I'll share stories because, some of this stuff is definitely unique and different. But today we're going to talk about Osaka Marathon coming up, of which I'm happy to say I will be there, but it'll be a bit of a weird way to get there, and I'll explain all that. We're going to talk about, I missed a few questions off the back of last week. I had about 4 questions I didn't get to about diet, specifically bicarb, creatine, ketones, some good questions, so I'll go through them. Also, I got a question about Nick Bester and him getting kicked off YouTube and something I said that might have been wrong or right. We'll talk about that. Ozempec. I'll talk a little bit about that. I tried Ozempic last week, 9 days ago, sorry. I'll talk a little bit about that, even though I have talked about it on another podcast, but I think that'll be interesting to some. Workouts of the week, some insight from my friend at the Athletics Integrity Unit, and we'll see where else we get to. So let's first talk about Osaka Marathon. So I guess you really need to know, as if you're interested in this at all, of course the chapters are there, you can skip ahead and get to the other stuff that have nothing to do with me if you want. There are chapters here, by the way, so if you get bored and you want to skip ahead to the next chapter, they, at least in the description of the podcast, you can see the timestamps of when the topic changes. But next 5, 10, 12, whatever minutes is going to be about some immigration stories and getting to the Osaka Marathon. If you're tuning in for the first time, which probably not that many people are doing, this is going to be hard to follow. But the very short version is I decided 2 years ago, really, or me and my now wife, Reem, decided about 2 years ago that we were going to commit to me trying to get a green card to live in the US permanently. That came about due to a few reasons. There's actually 3 or 4 reasons, but one of the main reasons was, even though we were obviously been together for quite some time then and we were getting married, I was having, a lot of people don't realize something about the US, especially people that come once every 2 or 3 or 4 years. You'll never experience this because if you visit the US as a tourist and you're not a citizen, if you visit once, even every year, and it's for less than a month, you'll never know anything different, right? You'll just enter and exit, you'll never get any questions. As soon as you start to enter more than twice in a 12-month period, and especially when you start to spend several months in every year in the country, you're basically flagged in their system as someone potentially trying to live here. Now, in 2021, when I escaped Australia's COVID lockdowns, which felt like I was scared. I'll never forget, just before I escaped, B2 to Advocate, one of Australia's media piss-taking companies that basically make fun of the government, they said there are 2 countries in the world right now with an outbound travel ban. It's North Korea and Australia. That was the case for almost a full year. In fact, I think it was more than a year. Anyways, I got around that travel ban by going to New Zealand one way and then out because I wanted to keep my business alive. It was completely dying because I couldn't leave Australia and there's very little I can do in Australia. So I met Reem not long after that when I got to the US, several months after that. And right around the same time as that, so this is 2021, I started to have a problem every time I entered the US. When I first went back after COVID, no problem. But then I went out to do a video to Mexico and came back, and then I went to Europe and came back, and then all of a sudden I started to get pulled into the secondary screening, every single time. And there were some times I'd get grilled in there, questioning why I'm there so much, this and that. And look, I'll be honest, I was sort of temporarily using Boulder as, I wouldn't say I'm living there, and I wasn't trying to live there long term, but I was trying to use it as a short-term base. And this all comes down to wording, right? If the government says, are you living here permanently? I'm like, well, no, I'm not. I'm staying in Boulder temporarily. And the B1, B2 visa that I have does say I can stay up to 6 months at a time. So in theory, I'm following what it says on my visa. But when you come to the US and you deal with the US CIS, some rules and laws can be hidden and also not super clear, and they can also change depending on the mood of the officer, I've learned. So what happened basically after that, I need to speed up the story. The next 3 years, I was coming in and out of the States. I always got in and I always got out fine. A couple of times, I honestly thought I wasn't going to get let in, purely on the basis that I had been in the country so long and they thought I needed to pay taxes here. That was it. Now, I don't pay taxes here. My tax residency is still Australia. And they basically were not liking that they were looking at the system and I was here so much. That was it. That was all it was. And basically, we wanted to solve this because I need to be able to come in and out of the country. I don't want to live somewhere. We chose the US because that's where Reem's from. She's born and raised in Chicago. Well, not born here, but she spent most of her adult life here. We basically said, okay, well, we're going to live in Chicago, get the green card, and then as soon as I get the green card, I can travel freely. But the problem is, once you submit the green card, you essentially have to wait in the US until it's processed. But what I learned yesterday was I was actually a little bit wrong when I thought before that you abandon the green card if you left. You don't abandon the green card specifically. You actually do not do it that at all. You sort of half abandon it, and I'll explain. When you apply for the green card, you can either apply outside the US or inside the US. But whatever one you choose, you have to stay where you are. Now, if you're outside the US, you don't have to stay literally where you applied. You just can't come into the US until it's being processed. And basically, I decided to do it inside because it looked like it was going to be 9 months of time, and I thought that's fine. And the 9 months got us up until December because that's what the USCIS website said. Currently, it'd be Australian citizens inside this country. It's going to be around 9 months. It did say approximately, but it said 9 months. It's an important point here for me to put in because this is where the story kind of gets really weird. Around the same time I learned, this is in April when I applied, I learned that you could apply for a thing called an advanced parole, which is a travel permit. It's a bit of a weird name, parole, like you're in prison. It's pretty funny actually, but it's called an advanced parole, but it's actually a travel visa. It basically means you can leave the US and come back in, and they've deemed your trip legit and all that stuff. And I noticed at the time that I could have applied for one of them, but the reason why I didn't back then was because the processing time for the advanced parole was showing longer than the processing of my green card. The advanced parole was saying 10 months. My green card was saying 9 months. So anyone that's thinking about that for a minute would go, well, why would I get the advanced parole and pay $680 for a travel permit if it looks like my green card will be here before that anyway? Okay, so that's kind of where I got stuck. Because turns out I've recently learned that those numbers on the website of the USCIS government to indicate how long things are going to take, they basically don't mean anything. Let's fast forward. In December, the portal's saying less than 1 week remaining. I'm like, great, I'll make Osaka, no problem. Paused, it said less than 1 week remaining for 4 weeks straight. Get to the end of January, I'm like, wow, now I'm 4 weeks out from Osaka, it still says less than 1 week remaining. Randomly one day, ironically the day after Trump took office, I think 2 days after, it said 4 months remaining. No, sorry, it said 5 months remaining for a couple of days. Now it says 4 months remaining. And so we're like, wow, well, I can't make Osaka then. So then what are our options? Even though it looked like all through November, December, January, it was just going to be processed any minute. Then all of a sudden it's like, no, it's still at 5 months or 4 months. So I was like, damn, okay, that's not ideal. And so I applied for what's called an emergency advanced parole. Now, at first you do a phone interview, which I did. And at first they said, this isn't urgent enough. Then I thought to myself, I didn't really explain why this is important to me. I just said, I've got a marathon and I committed to it and I'm in the elite field. So then I applied again and I said, I'm going to add more context to this. I've been invited there by Osaka Marathon. I'm ranked, top 12, top 10 in the marathon in Australia, and that's been the case for several years. And funnily enough, in 2025, I'm currently ranked number 1. Why do you think that is? Because there's been no marathons in Australia. So the Houston Marathon, where I ran 2:20, I'm ranked number 1. So I showed them that, even though they probably knew that's ridiculous. There's only 2 people on the list, me and the guy that also ran a Houston Marathon, Kurt, who I ran with for a bit. He ran 2:23. He's number 2, and that's it. So anyways, I then put a case forward saying, don't laugh. I could make the Olympics, I could make world champs, realistically, let's say that's not impossible. Wink. And so then I put that forward, and then they basically said on the phone, this actually is a good case. So I had an interview with a lady on the phone, and she went back and forth with me and said, yes, there are grounds here. You can apply for the emergency parole under the work category. It does seem like this is very important to your work. You need this in order to score points, world athletics points, things like that. And basically, on the phone, they said, yep, now you just need to go into the office in the city, bring all these things, go buy some passport photos, print off all these letters, print off all these forms, do all these things. I spent half a day doing all that, going out and buying, a couple of Ubers around the place, getting photo stuff, snowing, all that stuff. Took an Uber to the center, another $30. At this point, we're back up $100, about 10 hours, 6 hours of my time. I go in there, and cut a long story short, they basically laughed me out the door, saying this is not urgent. Urgent travel visas require a death in the family or similar. And I'm like, okay, well, why on earth did I have an interview yesterday on the phone with someone saying it was completely fine? And they're like, oh, that's a different department. I'm like, okay, that's a great answer. You know what? That's exactly the answer. Yep, that's the only answer, right? How else can you deflect that? And this has actually come off the back of 3 years of extremely inconsistent ins and outs within the US on the front of immigration. So sometimes when I come in, they let me in and say, welcome, stay up for 6 months. And one time I rolled in 2023 and they were so bothered by the fact that I was there 4 months earlier for 3 weeks that they basically said, you can come in here and you can stay 2 weeks and you have to leave. And the guy was also threatening a fine on me until I said, can you please specify exactly what this fine is for? And then he didn't have any reason. So that's the sort of way that these guys roll. Very strange. Anyway, I don't really want to go any further into that before I have ICE at my door removing me from the country, because that's probably the next step here if I keep going with this podcast. But cut a long story short, I learned yesterday that you don't abandon the visa if you leave the country anyway. What happens is you basically, if you leave the country, that's fine. You abandon the bridging visa, because I applied for two things. I applied for the I-130, which is the green card. You also apply for something else called the I-485. The I-485 basically means if the ICE come to your door, if anyone says, are you illegal? And they go, let me see. The I-485 is what you have that allows you to overstay your current visa while the I-130 is pending, and it means you're legally able to stay and overstay the tourist. Because essentially my tourist visa, or B1, B2 visa was 6 months long. I've now been in the US for just over 12 months straight. And the I-485 is what allows me to prove that I'm legal here before the green card is transitioned. If you leave, you only abandon the I-485, not the I-30. And that's fine. I'm happy to stay outside the country until this is processed, because it seems like it's only going to be a few more months. So turns out that is fine. You just can't come back in the meantime. So Reem and I had a big sit down last night. We thought about it and we're like, we have a lot of plans outside the country in the next few months, only because, we thought that the green card was going to be processed by now. That's what it looked like all through November, December. So we decided that we will go to Japan, race Osaka Marathon, and then go to Europe for a few months and sublet our place out and do that. So we're actually leaving here on Monday. It's now Wednesday. Very busy, packing up and doing all these things, because we're probably going to go away for 3 to 4 months. We're going to base in Portugal for most of the time. A few reasons why that is. We've got a couple of friends there, very cheap to stay. Also very easy to bring your dog. We're going to bring Turbo. Portugal is one of the most lax country in the world when it comes to bringing a pet with you. So all fun times. That's where we're going. So on Monday, we're going to Japan for 2.5 weeks. Osaka Marathon, so looking forward to that. Racing with Luke, I'm so excited. And I think PB is a really good chance too. I say that for every marathon at the moment, but I do think so. Training's been going super well. I've experimented with Ozempec and dropping some more pounds. Get to that later in the pod. So that's the plan. And then after that, we're flying to Portugal on the 10th, I think, or the 11th or 12th of March, something like that. And we'll stay there probably through until May or June. And then hopefully by then, the green card's in the mail. Apparently it's just going to be sent in the mail. And then I'm going to have to get a friend to go to my house and send me the green card, because I can't enter the country because I don't have that 485 anymore. I'm going to have to send them, they're going to send me the green card to Portugal, and then I can enter. And then I can enter, no problem, for 5 years. And then I can extend it, and then I'm fine. So hopefully didn't get too bored, fall asleep, skip ahead, but that's where I'm at. So stoked to say I'm going to Osaka. That's the long story short. But there you go. So if you ever think that you basically, I told that story for a few reasons, but if you ever think that you want to come in and out of the States a lot, be careful, because they don't like that at all. Like I said at the start, if you're like my mum, for example, is really surprised this always happens to me, because she comes here once every 2 years, 1 year, for a couple of weeks. If you do that and the police see and the US UCIS see that on your history, they're never going to say anything to you. No problem. You'll never have an issue. It's as soon as you start coming in more than 2 times in 6 months, and then you stay more than a month in that's when they basically say this person's living here and they shouldn't be, because they should be paying tax if so. That's the whole thing. So it's a shame really, because UCIS, I want to be able to leave here, and I want to be able to come back in at some point. I don't want my green card to be ripped up in the office. So there we go. Osaka Marathon. I'm pumped for it. It's going to be in 12 days, or maybe 11 days by now, because Japan's essentially the day ahead. And I think all things are going well. I took the 4 days off last week. Luke and I spoke mostly on the Training Talk podcast about that and how we feel about that. think it just did nothing. 4 days off. Like, I think if you're super consistent, so we were experimenting with having a little bit of a forced down period in this block because we just noticed that, we explained it in the Training Talk pod, I'll summarize. We noticed, or at least I noticed that over the years, oftentimes when a pro athlete or any athlete puts in a really consistent block of training and then they get close to the race, they either get sick or injured and they take 3-4 days off and they get back into training for a couple of weeks and then race, they almost always race super well when they do that. And I think it's because that recovery period really helped them not overdo it. So we did it forcefully. We did 4 days off without even being injured or sick. But during that time, I took Ozempec. And I'll get to the Ozempec part at the end of the pod, but the training, when I got back into training and started running again, I don't think it helped me. I don't think it hindered me. It's just like it didn't happen, which is kind of funny, like 4 days off, because a lot of people would think 4 days off, you're going to lose fitness. That quote is just like, almost just seems silly to me now. Like, what is fitness anyway? Like, even if you do lose fitness in 4 workouts, why wouldn't you gain back that fitness you just lost? Like, so it's like, it's because it's certainly not a case whereby you look at it in a vacuum and go, if you take 1 day off, you need 1 workout to recoup that fitness. It doesn't really work like that. It's much more nuanced than that. It revolves around energy and weight and mental state and stress and sleep. It's much more complicated than that in going, if I take 3 days off, will I lose fitness? You need to understand, sort of the wrong question to ask in my mind. Even though I used to think that's a good question to ask, in my mind it kind of almost is a question that doesn't really make sense. It's like, well, maybe minorly on the aerobic side, but like if you then lose half a kilo in that time because you're sick, you might come back and be faster because you've lost the weight. And is that fitter then? Like if you're faster, would you deem that fitter? Because I have heard stories, and this has happened to me, in Ethiopia in 2019, I got so sick from food poisoning. I very rarely get sick, but I got bedridden sick for about 5 days. I didn't eat anything in 5 days. I was just force-feeding myself like little strings of rice in the 5th day. I was so sick. I ate something bad in Ethiopia. I lost so much weight. I didn't weigh myself because I was in a disgusting hotel in Addis Ababa, which, not disgusting, it was all right. The hospital I tried to go to was disgusting. I lost so much weight, and after that, I came back, and I had when I was sick, I wrote off the idea of doing a 10K race. But I did a 10K race about a week later because I bounced back really quickly from the food poisoning. I sort of felt better really quickly and got back on it. And then I ran a really fast 10K after that. And I remember thinking to myself, I think this is because I'm so light. And so did I lose fitness there? Like I just lost weight, got faster. Now it doesn't always pan out like that. Like losing weight, don't get me wrong, losing weight does not always equate to just getting faster. That's another whole side thing to this. That's not what I'm saying at all. Oftentimes there's stories of people losing weight and they get slower for reasons that are interesting. I'm just saying that it's much more nuanced than that. And if you're going to ask the question of, am I going to lose fitness over something like 3 or 4 days off, you need to look at, the first thing you need to look at is, what's your training been like in the last 6 weeks or 8 weeks? If it's super consistent, you're not going to lose anything. If it's not, and it's choppy and up and down, yeah, like maybe a little bit. But then once again, like if you take 4 days off and eat 10,000 calories a day and gain 2 kilos, you're going to lose significant speed. Fitness? No. Speed? Yes. Is that fitness? Yes. So you know what I'm saying? So anyways, I don't even know where I was going with that. Like, why was I getting to that point? The 4 days off in Osaka. So yeah, I'm going to Osaka. I'm going to an Osaka marathon. Lightest I've ever been after some Ozempec treatment in the last 9 days, and training's good. So I'm looking forward to it, man. I think the last week has been a bit stressful, just with the USCIS stuff and thinking, and basically deciding to move overseas for 4 months with a couple of days, with 3 days, 5 days notice, 6 days notice. Anyways, we're all good. But on the end of this, I just want to say that, how last week I shared a story about a guy called Derek. He emailed in saying maybe don't do the visa because they're not letting people into the country like himself. He's a journalist. He wrote a couple of things about Palestine. Now he's not allowed to get in the country and they're not giving him a reason. He actually followed up with me this morning, and I thought I'd just say this because it kind of transitions into some other questions. But he said, hey, Matt, emailed in just like a couple of hours before I was recording this. I got it. I just thought I'd throw it in here because it follows up. He goes, thanks for responding on the podcast. Just a completely unrelated follow-up about THC, CBD, and nagging pain. I have been dealing with what I believe to be Achilles tendinopathy for quite literally years. It flares up when I get above 60 miles a week, 95k, which is basically always because even in off-season, I'm typically doing 60 a week. I had previously tried everything, insane mobility work, strength work, physio, etc., and nothing seemed to work. I just kept managing it and dealing with the pain. After listening to you talk about your experiences with THC a few weeks ago, I decided to give it a shot. I quit alcohol and started taking THC gummies, not really that much, 2.5 milligrams worth. That's pretty low. That's a very low dose. In the evenings of harder efforts. That sounds like I'm a big, heavy user. Not necessarily. And sometimes on easy days as well. I also take CBD capsules every day before bed. I initially thought it wasn't really doing anything, but after 4 weeks of doing this, I'm noticing the pain is far less intense. I still feel a bit of ankle stiffness, but that acute Achilles pain walking up and down stairs and running at harder efforts is basically gone. All this while upping my mileage to 85.90 a week for the past 6 weeks, plus 2 workouts with marathon pace with my long run. No real question here. Just thought I'd lend some of my experience as evidence that this does seem to work for at least some people. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I'm not recommending this right now. I'm just saying that that's another person that THC, CBD has, that's got rid of my Achilles tendinopathy. It's just a shame that this is so taboo. Marijuana, that is, THC, CBD, and in so many countries you just can't get it. It's illegal. In the US, it's retail. So oh my God, I just looked outside for the dispensaries to indicate how far they are away. It is literally sideways snow at the window. It looks like the earth is about to end. It's almost like I'm in a cloud, actually. Anyways, dispensaries. There's 4 dispensaries within 800 meters of my house. Dispensary is basically like a liquor store. Now, Americans know all this, but I'm just sharing because a lot of people are surprised about this outside the country. You walk in there and you buy THC or CBD just like you're buying a beer or a wine bottle. It's exactly the same. And the vibe, the consensus or the feeling I get amongst at least people in these communities is that marijuana, THC, CBD is probably... it's not right to compare it to alcohol because it's just different, but it's probably not as bad for you. But you can't say which one's healthier. That question sort of doesn't make sense to people that understand this very well. But you can ask the question is which one's worse for you? And I think the consensus here is alcohol for sure. So it's only a matter of time until this gets worldwide. And even when it gets worldwide, 25 and younger do not take. Period. No questions. After that, you do your own research, see what comes up. But I know a lot of people that have found tendinopathy majorly reduced by THC and CBD. Okay. What's next? Oh, yeah. So Nick Bester. Where's that question? Oh, yeah. Tyler, Instagram. Hey, man, I see Nick Bester is back on YouTube now and his Instagram account seems to be active again. Do you think he got kicked off or just hacked? One of your stories indicated you were familiar with some of the rules and he may have been kicked off. Yeah, so I wanted to talk about this because I did say something on Instagram that may have been wrong. But I'll tell you what I was thinking. So surely most of you know who Nick Bester is. Let's give it a little bit of background. I've shared this story a few times, so sorry if you've heard it. Nick Bester is a 2:19 marathon runner from the UK. I met him in very end of 2021 at Valencia Marathon when I was strongly considering starting a coaching company at the time. I was about to start one. I already had plans. I already had a name. I met him right at the same time as I was pretty much starting to work on it. And the main reason why I was working on a coaching company was, I'll be honest with you, I knew a lot of coaches. I knew how to coach myself. I loved coaching. I still do. I still coach. I'm coaching many people now. I'm opening up a few new spots in the next couple of weeks, specifically for people that want to train for marathons from July to December. And anyways, at the time, I thought to myself, the coaching company would be great to cover the costs of the business as well, even though I still think I could run a coaching company well. Because the business on the YouTube channel at the time was losing a lot of money because we didn't really work with sponsors at the time. Our travel costs were very expensive and the YouTube ad revenue is pretty small. It wasn't even nearly covering our costs. In 2021, I went backwards like 12 grand with the YouTube side. And it was just lucky that I'd had some, savings and basically some income before starting the business that I put up. And we had some runway, basically. And when I met him, he basically immediately thought to himself, oh, this would be great to partner with a media company to drive business to his company. Now I think he had 45 athletes at the time, and he had 2 or 3 other coaches. That might be wrong. It was about that. So I think they had about 60 or 70 people in the company, something like that. But I remember he had 45 or 43 people, which is a lot. I joined, and then I was really busy in the next 6 months with content. I was really growing the channel, but part of the deal is that every inquiry that came through Sweat Elite, it was my fault in setting up the way that the inquiries came through to him. Because what was supposed to happen is they were supposed to come to the website, but he maneuvered it, right? Because that's his strength. He maneuvered it so that the inquiries went through the website, and the promo code that people put in there was all on his end, and I couldn't really access it. I just had to take his word for it, and that's the mistake that I made. Because the deal was every inquiry that came through for him that was referred by Sweat Elite would get 20%, and then I would also get business. Now, over the next 9 months, his coaching clientele went from 44, 45, 46 to 185 people. Now, you could argue in itself, coaching 185 people is impossible, but it went up that high, and the referrals were 2. So basically I'm saying in the first 3 years of his business, he went from 0 to 45. In the following, I think it was year, might have been 14 months. It was around a year. It was give or take a few months. He went from 45 to 185. He believes it was only 2 referrals. I believe it was mostly our referrals. So I started to question the fact that, well, why is his thing going? And I said, can I please see the back system? He didn't want me to see it for some reason. He said there's private information in there that's just for the business. That's when I started asking questions. And then I started saying, I also thought I would have had more inquiries for coaching myself. I only had 18 people over the year. And then I learned of a few people, more than one, in a 1-month period that inquired for me, and Nick said that I was full as a coach, and Nick took them on. So not only was he stealing business directly from me, he was also not giving me the kickback for the promotion code. On top of that, he completely ripped off all the coaches on the Spain training camp in 2022. He basically charged us all the same rate as the people that he was selling the camp to at Best Athletics, and he made huge amounts of margin on the coaches, and then expected the coaches to help out at the camp. There was a camp in Torrevieja I think it was end of 2022. Yeah, September 2022. This is just before things went sour. And I remember thinking to myself when we checked into the house, I'm like, this house is tiny and it's got no air conditioning. Why on earth are we paying $140 a night? Reem and I, we couldn't even fit our suitcases in the room. And then I was like, we can't stay here. It's too small and it's too hot. Like, this is summer too, 30 degrees at night. And so I quickly looked for a place down the road, and I booked an apartment down the road for like €60 a night that was like a 2-bedroom apartment. And then I asked him, how much was his apartment, like the base cost? He wouldn't tell me. He said, that's private. And I'm just like, okay, this is a joke. On top of that, he also, quote unquote, gave me shares in the company, which I looked into, and this company doesn't exist. It's reporting like 300, or at least at the time, it was reporting £300 a month. He was setting up all these tax shelters and putting the income all over the place to avoid paying VAT. So he gave me shares of 10% because of our partnership, and the business that he was giving me shares for was basically reporting $300, which basically means it's worth nothing. If he was reporting it normally and the company was reporting the 800K or whatever it was bringing in the door, the company would be worth 2, 3, 4 million pounds at some point, and my 10% would be worth 2, 3, 400K at some point. That was where I was heading with it. He was not heading with it. He was selling me fake shares. And so all that, crumbled into me leaving and going, okay, this is ridiculous. I'm starting my own thing. And then back to this question. I know, based on talking to a lot of people, that he is an extremely dishonest person. He rips people off. He basically looks at everyone as a piece of money to try and rip from. He's done it to many people, and when I fell out with him, I had a fair few people message me and say, yep, that's just what happens with Nick all the time. And speaking to this, though, when I learned that he was off YouTube, I thought to myself, it's almost certainly because he's bought views, surely. Now, it turns out it seems like he was actually hacked because his Instagram was posting cryptocurrency stuff, and it seems like he got it all back. But, someone told me a few months ago, they're like, do you realize Nick Best, because he blocked me everywhere when I started to figuring out and calling him out. He goes, do you realize Nick Best has got 88,000 followers on Strava? And I said, can I see that? I don't believe that, because I think he had 10,000 like a couple of years ago. And then when I looked at the account, not on my phone, on someone's account that he wasn't blocked, I realized that the engagement, like the likes and the comments, were like very similar to the amount that I get. And I have 12,000 followers. And that's a really easy way to see if someone's buying followers or buying engagement. You just look at like the ratios of things. I do that all the time on Instagram. Like if someone has 100,000 followers on Instagram, but they're getting 10 likes of a thing, it's very clear what they've bought. And it's the same on his Instagram. Like his Instagram gets 800, 600 likes, and he's got, I don't even know how many followers, like 40,000, 45? Like every time I post something, I get the same likes or more, and I've got 23,000. I think I normally get much more likes than that. And so my conclusion was, of course he buys stuff. Like, why wouldn't he? That's how he rolls. And so I thought, when he got banned, I thought, it's going to be because YouTube probably cracked down on that. Now, it turns out that was actually probably wrong because he's got it all back. So that's where I was going with that, because Strava, when I looked at that on my friend's phone, I saw 88,000. I was like, but the like counts are almost the same as someone with 12,000. So that doesn't make any sense. He's obviously bought the followers. Now, I didn't even know you could buy followers on Strava. I didn't even know you could buy views or or anything on YouTube either. I know Instagram is pretty easy. Everyone does that. Or loads of people do that at least. But yeah, that's what I thought. But it turns out I was actually wrong. I think he actually did get hacked, and Google do not. And who knows if he's actually even buying anything on YouTube, as in like engagement. He might not be. But on Strava and Instagram, I would put big dollars down that he is. So yeah, anyway, that's the answer to my speculation on my story when I said that, it seems like Nick has been banned. It seems like he was not. Okay, let's go through some of these quick questions that I got last week about nutrition stuff. Email, Tony. Hey, Matt. To follow up on my Instagram message, I have never taken Maurten Bicarb, but I've had several athletes experiment with it. And I also have listened to David Roche and how he uses it for his workouts. One interesting thing that David does, instead of the gel that comes with the Maurten Bicarb, he'll use an SIS gel so that he's getting some calories in with the bicarb. I don't know if the gel that comes with the bicarb has calories in it or not. I did almost order from Maurten's website and noticed that the weight calculator and listening to David has said about it. Their bicarb product does not come in different sizes, and the hack was just to order the max weight allowed, then to use half the dose when you use it, allowing you to get maybe 8 doses out of one order compared to just 4 doses. Very smart. I feel like that's just what everyone would do, surely. This hack is mainly for people that are paying for the product, not the sponsored athletes, of course. I don't know if it's to help with digestion or for it to work at its best, but I believe you are supposed to take it 2 hours before a big workout. I know you didn't have any issues during your workout, but just something to think about or experiment with. And lastly, I have heard horror stories of athletes taking it, then for whatever reason, not doing a hard run or even doing a run at all, and then feeling awful the rest of the day. You are basically taking 5 grams of sodium, and if you don't have that big workout effort in there, it makes you feel pretty crappy, stomach cramping and nauseous. So if you take it, make sure you are motivated and feeling good enough to make the workout happen. Loving the podcast, Tony. Nice. That's interesting. There you go. There's a hack to get double the value out of Maurten. I feel like everyone probably knows that. I'm probably the last person to figure that out. I'm not going to. I don't know. I think I'm definitely going to make my own one. Figure that out. I've got a lot of people that have emailed about that, as in like how to do it. So yeah. Okay. Pietro email. Hi Matt. Big fan from Italy here. Have absolutely been loving your podcast while on the elliptical, for which I took inspiration from your pods. I ran my first marathon in Florence in November 2023, and now I'm preparing for the Milan Marathon, which will be on April the 6th, 2025, looking to run sub 3. Prep is going well with already some huge long runs ticked off. However, here is the deal. 3 weeks before the marathon, from Sunday 16th of March to Saturday 22nd, I have a huge conference in Germany which I cannot skip. I am currently a PhD student here in Italy. How would you approach this being so close to the marathon? I was hopefully be able to train there, but not as much. And I was thinking to start tapering a bit that week, with my peak long run being on the Saturday before leaving for the conference. I'm sorry to ask basically for 3 personal advice, and I will understand if you won't answer. Thanks a lot for all the info and inspiration you give on YouTube and the podcast. Well, as I say, Pietro, I'm more than happy for anyone to send me questions here because it allows me to actually make content. And without your questions, I'm going to have to come up with something else to do. And I want to answer questions because I feel like people are interested in hearing the answers. So you basically can train normally up until 3 weeks to go. I don't think you're going to have a problem here at all, even if you reduce significantly from there. I think if you train normally and do your last peak long run 3 weeks out and then reduce the volume by 50, 60%, you're going to be hindered by like basically nothing. You might run 0.1% slower. You might run the same time in the race. You might not even be affected at all. But I think, look, this is going to sound stupid and it's very naive to say, but like when someone says they don't have time to run, now in this case you have a specific conference to go to and it might be literally all day. But I feel like in any reasonable scenario when you're dealing with an employer or a conference or anything like that, you shouldn't really be working more than 12 hours a day. Like, okay, I know that's stupid to say because some employers break rules, they pressure you, they do this stuff, they tell you must do this or you'll get kicked out. I mean, that's very rare. And some countries have literal laws to prevent employers from doing that. So in some countries, there's peer pressure and there's not enough laws to stop employers asking you to work 16 hours straight. I get that. But if you're working 12 hours a day and you're sleeping 8, or even 7 is enough for most, at least for a short period of time, you've still got 4 or 5 hours in the day. Yep, you got to eat. Yep, you got to do these things. It's really about properly analyzing where you can allocate your time. And if you can't find any time in the day to train, like you really need to try and get yourself out of 1 hour of something else you're doing. Just try. Just pick the one thing that you think that you could get rid of and get rid of it. That can be, meeting with your friend. I don't know. Like everyone's different and everyone's got their own priorities, but I struggle to really understand, and I'm very aware there might be scenarios here that I just don't understand or I don't know. And someone might be sitting here going, yeah, but I'm a nurse, I'm doing 16-hour shifts and I sleep 8 hours. Like, how do I do that? Okay, like I think my only response to that would be, it seems like your employer might be taking the piss and might maybe be breaking the law in some countries by doing that. So maybe you should look into that, potentially. I'm just trying to help here, right? But I'm just saying, Pietro, I think if you're really careful with your planning and you're really careful with your eating, you eat early in the evening so you can sleep well at night, go to bed early, wake up early. When you're traveling, the biggest hack for getting training done well, there's one hack. It's so simple. And most people don't know it and they don't do it. When you're traveling for any reason, whether it be tourism or business, run first thing in the morning. If you don't do that, it's so hard to get it done. It's something weird about the brain. When you're somewhere you don't know, processing is much harder for you to do everything. It's harder for you to get food. Your brain you're not on autopilot anymore, and your brain just gets destroyed through the day. You're much more tired than normal. In the evening, you'll struggle to run. Some people can do it. I struggle. Get up and do it first thing in the morning. That's my best advice here. And hopefully you can allocate some, you can try and find some time in the day to get these workouts done. I really do think that even if you have 1 hour every single day, 7 days a week, the long run you're going to need more. But then again, if you're doing your last long run 3 weeks out, you don't even really need one more long run. It's probably ideal to have one more or 2 more, but you can really get away with having no more long runs here. You can do a few tempo 60-minute runs, but if you do no more long runs between 3 weeks out to the race, believe me, you're going to be less affected than what you realize. As long as you keep up some intensity and you keep up some volume. Okay, some faster ones. YouTube, JGB87. Hey Matt, do you take creatine, protein, ketones daily or only after a marathon? I use creatine during the hard training weeks and it really helps with recovery, but I use it before training and energy levels seem to go up. So I don't have a set thing here. I've sometimes gone for weeks where I do have it only after hard workouts, and then sometimes I do it all the time. I don't really have a strict routine here. I definitely have it after all hard workouts. Creatine I have every day. Ketones I have after every hard workout only. Protein I have every day. Hope that helps. _12PK. Do you remember how the recovery was with 5 milligrams of creatine versus 15 milligrams you are doing now? Do you think it makes a difference taking the additional dose? I think it does, but it's marginal for sure. I've noticed a little bit of a difference, but it's really hard to say. It's sort of like, what's the difference between having, I don't think this is actually a very good analogy, but I was about to say, what's the difference between having 100 milligrams of caffeine and 300 milligrams? In fact, that isn't a bad analogy because you probably noticed that. But I think in this case, you'd only, trust me to come up with the worst analogy possible. Short answer, I think you do notice it a little bit. The reason why I upped the dose was because I heard that 5 milligrams is the minimum dose, and it's usually prescribed for people that are not really training, at least for a marathon. And I was like, my theory was like, well, we probably expend a lot more effort and calories, so why don't we take a bit more? And then I heard of people taking 20, and they said it was great, so I've stuck with 15. All right, next, YouTube, David Molinaro. Curious how you arrived at your recovery stack. I think you said exogenous ketones 40 grams. I think that's 4 of these ketone IQs. Creatine 15 grams and protein 60 grams. Trial and error. So my response, he said trial and error, scientific, or you just feel good. Creatine effectiveness is kind of a hard measure, and 15 is usually recommended for loading in the initial phase. Cheers with a question mark. Yeah, so I trial and errored this. I don't have any real reason for any of this. I just tried originally 1 ketone shot, 5 milligrams, 20 milligrams of protein, and then upped it. And I sort of tried to understand, like, is it better to have more ketones? Yes, it is. Is it better to have more creatine? Not super sure. I think so. Is it better to have more protein? The latest research says yes, it is, for sure. I just kept playing around with the dose, and that's where I'm at. I'm kind of keen to maybe try even going much higher, potentially at some point, see what happens, but that's where I'm at right now. All right, midlife runner, good old Andrew Pozza. On the weight loss, just a theory. Oh, this is long. Just a theory, but I think there needs to be a time adjustment if you're crashing 10 to 20 pounds in a few months for the body to stabilize and the stress of a deficit, and for what I imagine is a slightly different running economy. Yes, the increased probability of injury is just a factor, but it's harder to hit those big workouts in a deficit if you're truly crash dieting. And big deficit stresses the body. I wonder if the difference is negligible if you lose a bit of fitness but gain some time in weight. Going back to what I was saying earlier. Obviously, you are an example of losing weight whilst training, but for a bigger runner looking to lose that much that fast before a big race, very risky. Also, the comparison of, say, 200 pounds or 180 pounds assumes also topped off with carbs and replenished. I've made the mistake of losing a few pounds leading up to a race for it to only be mostly water weight and stored carbs I need for the race. Very important point, that one. Replay that if you need to. So maybe I'm just protecting. But the viewer may best be served by losing 10 to 20 pounds in a 3 to 6 month off season and then eating back at maintenance for just as long as his body can adjust. Asterisk, I am not a nutritionist. Yes, I know. I'm not telling anyone to take my advice, just sharing a thought. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with all that. Like, the ideal scenario is you do get into race weight or the weight that you want to get into before the marathon block. Yep. There's nothing more for me. You nailed it there. Okay, a couple more here before we get into the workouts of the week. We're at 40 minutes. Subashi. I have done a ton of research and use sodium bicarbonate a lot. I put it in simple terms. If you are not using sodium bicarbonate, you'll regret it, just like those who didn't use coffee in their professional career. You know, I know a fair few people that don't use coffee and they're very good at what they do, so that's a bit of an odd statement. In fact, I know one particular that hasn't ever touched caffeine, and he's extremely high functioning. So very, very well paid as well. Sodium bicarbonate is great for recovery, super great. In my experience and research is that most packaged supplements for endurance do contain sodium bicarbonate. In my experience with other runners, they have also run PBs and are able to train a lot and won races. There's a reason why sodium bicarbonate is the top 5 supplements used by Olympic athletes and sci-fi proven. Sci-fi proven. Yes, it's good for all distances. There you go. Subathi has spoken. Sodium bicarbonate, if you're not taking caffeine, I mean, I love caffeine, let me be clear. I don't know if I could function without caffeine. I have about 300, 400 milligrams every day, spaced out over several doses. But I mean, that's just like 3 coffees worth. That's probably what most people take. Anyways, yeah, bicarb. I feel like bicarb in 10 years, the vibes I'm getting, the feelings I'm getting is that most people probably will be taking it, but Morton will most likely not be in business with that regard unless they majorly bring down their price, because that's the main reason why I've heard that people don't use Morton. It's just too expensive. So one of my projects in the next few months is I'm going to figure out how to, I mean, many people already have, so I'm just going to copy them, how to do this cheaply. Okay, workouts of the week. Workouts of the week. Make sure you tag me on Strava if you use these. I love to see it. Not for any other reason, just that it just is cool to see. So every week I share a 5K, 10K specific workout, a half marathon specific workout, and a marathon specific workout. And usually, and so these are just flat out, use them wherever you like. I try to advise maybe where to put them, but ultimately they're a plug for our coaching academy because these are the sorts of workouts that we use, but it's very ideal to see the bigger picture of where they fit into the week and perfectly structuring where these go in so that you can make the most of them. Because if you don't put them in the right place, you're not fully recovered hitting some of these, or you're not in the right phase leading into a race, they may even hurt you, to be honest. You need to know where to put these. That's very critical. 5K, 10K workout. I'm going to say these workouts actually this week are pretty boring. They're pretty boring. But they're also very, very mentally effective for racing. Usually I do the opposite. I do workouts that are like kind of fancy or interesting so that they're good to do when you're alone and you're struggling with motivation and you just want to do a workout that's sort of changing all the time and it's not a grind. This is sort of the opposite. These are actually kind of grinds. But I would argue that these ones are very effective for mentally preparing yourself for a race, because a race is a grind if you do it properly. So you do have to do some workouts that are mentally grinding, because if you're constantly doing workouts that are changing, you stop. I'll never forget. I listened to a podcast of Frank Shorter, and he said something like, if you're always stopping and training in reps all the time, your brain's going to get used to that. So you need to do some workouts that are long and hard. And he was, his staple was 20 miles, pretty hard. I think the second half really hard. And yeah, that's what you got to do sometimes. Intervals and threshold with lots of breaks, they work, but you also need to prepare your mind to do grinding stuff. So 5K, 10K workout, 5 sets or 6 sets of the following. Very simple. 1K at 10K effort, 30 seconds rest. 500 meters at 5K effort, 2 minutes rest between each set. So it's basically a broken 500 where you're going 10K effort, 5K effort with 30 seconds rest. Half marathon workout. These are all written in the description as well. If you're running or you want to note these down, all written in the description of the podcast. Half marathon workout. This is boring, but it's so good. I'm giving this to athletes that I coach now and they're really liking it because they think it's mentally preparing for a race, which it is. 10K at half marathon effort. That would mean 10K at just a little bit below your goal pace, because the effort means, the same effort in a race is going to be a little bit faster. You've got your fast shoes on, you've carbed up, you've atmosphere, all these things. Sometimes paces in training are the same as race, but usually not. Usually 3 to 5 seconds a kilometre or 5 to 8 seconds a mile, I'd say, is probably marathon effort. Is an effort slower than the goal pace. So 10K at half marathon effort, which is 3 to 5 seconds a kilometre slower, 8 seconds a mile, something like that. 2 minutes rest, and then 2K fast. Just 95% effort fast. Basically like you're finishing off a half marathon. 10K, 2 minutes rest, 2K, 2 reps. Marathon workout, very similar. And this is sort of inspired a little bit by Jake Barraclough's 2:16 training run the other day, which I thought was brilliant. He did 2:16 in a marathon, at least GPS measured, ran a loop. Who knows if that's accurate, but probably close. He did 30K at marathon effort, what seems, or 3:18 per K, which is about 10 seconds per kilometre slower than his goal pace. And then he did 12K or 12.2K fast. So I'm going to reduce that a little bit and go 20K at marathon effort. That's long. That's very long. 2 minutes rest. Jake didn't have rest, but I'm going to say 2 minutes rest. Jake is a borderline pro athlete, so this is for people that are not pros. 20K at marathon effort, so you're basically doing almost a half marathon at your marathon effort. That's hard. But you should get to that being like, okay, this is now 7 out of 10 effort at the end. 2 minutes rest, and then 5K at faster than your marathon goal pace. It's okay to also do 3K. After 20K and then 3K, try and get 5K at faster than your goal marathon pace, assuming weather is good. If the weather's not good, it's hot, it's really windy, whatever, maybe just try and go your goal marathon pace. You can determine that. But if the weather's pretty good, see if you can go 5K a little bit faster. Again, it's kind of like tiring the legs and then emptying the tank. Same for both. Important for the half marathon and marathon ones to be quite a long way out from the race because these are really hard. They're very hard, especially the marathon one. So you want to have at least 2 weeks, probably 3 weeks or more actually, in between these workouts and the race. The 5K, 10K one that I shared, that can be done really up until probably a week out. But ideally probably more than 10 days out from a 5K, 10K. Enjoy. Sponsored by the Sweat Elite Coaching Academy. And we're actually thinking about putting all the workouts of the week onto our website, on the Sweat Elite Coaching Academy website, so people can just go there as a resource, find them all, and then just pick and use them. And hopefully that gets picked up in Google search engine optimization and people can find us as well. Although I think AI is taking over Google search engine optimization. I've been using that DeepSeek app, the Chinese one. It's really good. I have a feeling that Google search soon will be, I think in 5 years, everyone will immediately be going to DeepSeek or ChatGPT and not Google anymore. Because Google there's so much stuff on the internet that Google finds that's just not like correct. It's just like not real information. Then, okay, well, that means AI, is that real information? Isn't that pulling from Google? That, I don't know. Let me get back to you with that one. But anyway. What else was I going to talk about this week? So I was going to talk about the best of thing, Osaka, Ozempec. Oh yeah, Ozempec. I didn't really talk about that before I talk about Shelby Houlihan and some AIU news. So I spoke a little bit about Ozempec before at the beginning, not much, and I spoke about it quite a bit on the podcast with Luke. But I am going to say here that I'm not going to talk about it too much here. Luke interviewed me about Ozempec brilliantly the other day. I'm going to give him huge credit here. His questions were so good. And it's on the private podcast feed that we have. Now, I'm using this as a straight up ask to say, I would love your support if you're listening here, to go and listen to that podcast, but also join us. And try not to, my tone is important here. Don't look at it as an expense. Look at it as supporting us as a company, because we don't really work with many sponsors anymore. We have a couple of sponsorships. I'm very careful with who I work with now. Say Sky is one that I am. Saw is one that I am. Keaton IQ from time to time. But I'm not working with many brands anymore, and we really would like to grow this business organically without relying on brands for many reasons. And that comes as a result of, one way that we're doing it is via people chipping in a small amount every month to access all of our content. Now, I've always wondered in the first place, like I pay for Strava, I pay for a few news sites that I'm fairly sure are reporting real information. The Economist is one, and a couple of others, even though not everything The Economist posts I necessarily agree with. And, that's because I don't want them to disappear. So I guess I'm asking, if you'd like us to keep creating content and be financially stable here, which is something that Sweat Elite's actually been very difficult to pull off. I've considered closing it down quite a few times because it's just not bringing enough income, and I'm able to earn significantly more money elsewhere. Now, luckily we're in a position now where that's sort of starting to turn, but we would love your support. And so if you want to listen to the thing about Ozempec, consider joining us over there. I'd like for you to view it though as a good investment, not an expense, because Not only can you listen to all the podcasts we put on the private podcast feed over there, you can also join our Discord channel where we talk amongst each other about training and racing. Now, admittedly, I actually have been a little bit vacant from the Discord in the last 3 days because of this UCIS stuff, all the preparation for it. But typically in a week where things aren't crazy for me, I'm in there every day. This week I've been slack. You might be listening wondering why I haven't replied in the last 2-3 days. It's because I'm moving my whole life overseas in 5 days with very little notice. But I'm normally in there with Luke every day talking to people about training, racing, diet, all these things. And so it's $99 a year or $10 a month to sign up, and you can access all the podcasts and the Discord channel. So if you'd like to do that, I would love for you to join, because we'd love for your support, and we'd love more people on the Discord channel. The link to join is sweatelite.co, not .com.co/shareholders. It's in this podcast and YouTube description. If you want to head there, like I said, $10 a month or $9.99 a year. If you go the year one, it's about $8.50 a month, which is like $2 a week. And you can basically utilize us as advisors, because we'll answer your questions about training and racing. So if you're coaching yourself, you've got a question, you want to get some answers, you want to get some feedback from people, you want to have a community to join. I mean, people are racing and they're posting their race results in there too. It's pretty cool. Consider joining us there. It's a great community, and it's $2 or $2.50 a week. So it's pretty cheap. So all the Ozempec information is in there, but the short version is that I'll tell you that I did also talk about a bit on the Training Talk podcast that's public, is I didn't even consider taking Ozempec until I learned that Brian Johnson was taking it. So Brian Johnson, Google him, guy trying to live forever. He talked about it in a very different light to what I'd heard others talk about it. Before I'd heard there's side effects, there's all these things. He said most of that's propaganda. Most of it's propaganda for companies that are competitors of Ozempec. Side effects are there for some, without a doubt. By the way, what I'm sharing right now is not medical advice. It's what I've heard and my own experiences. Let me be clear. Things I've heard, I'm not giving anyone advice, and I definitely do not recommend anyone take Ozempec. But Ozempec came onto the market, I think in 2019, and lots of actors and actresses were taking it to lose weight very quickly, and I knew about it, didn't even think much of it. And then it's become huge in the US. Seems like loads of people taking it. All these podcasts are talking about it. And I was like, for a while, I was like, wonder how that works. And then I heard Brian Johnson talk about it, who's very lean, very light. He's trying to live forever. Look him up. And he spoke about it very differently to what I'd heard others speak. And this guy has 8 doctors working for him to try and extend his life. He actually said there's a lot of properties in there that are potentially good for cancer. That's what he said, like as in avoiding. He also said that it's so powerful to reduce addictions to things, but not only foods, addictions to anything. And so far, they haven't found any downsides other than a bit of nausea in the beginning. So I thought, wow, he's like 6% body fat, similar to me. Like, I'm going to do this too. So I took it for one time about 9 days ago now. And yeah, 9 days on, and I still don't feel overly hungry, even though I am eating enough. But it is powerful stuff. And I took the lowest dose of 0.25 milligrams. Very strong. I couldn't eat at all for 2 days, really. Like, really struggled to eat even blueberries. Just the thought of it just made me ill. And then on day 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 today, I could easily not eat the whole day, no problem. And I'm not normally like that. But yeah, I'm trying to get in 2,000 calories, and some days much less. But those days are now gone. I had a 5-day window where I went very low. I basically went under 1,000 calories a day, but I wasn't training then. I was only doing a lot of walking. I took those 4 days off, sorry. In those days, I wasn't running, because that's not smart. If you're having very low calories or fasting, best not to train hard for sure at those times, because your fuel won't be there for the run, and then injury risk, all these things. So yeah, that's the basics. I think it's a great experiment. Might do it again, might not. Currently, it's not banned by WADA, and I don't think it will be, because it's not performance enhancing. It just doesn't make you hungry. That makes you lighter, but not always does lighter make you better. Oftentimes, if you get lighter, you get worse. So it's not. I think the argument could not be put forward that it's performance enhancing. It doesn't improve your endurance. Doesn't improve your strength. It just literally makes you not hungry, which then makes you lighter. So I've heard that World Athletics is looking into it, but I'd find it hard. I've spoken about this on a different podcast, and in my opinion, I remember. I would be really surprised if at this point, if it is banned at some point. But right now, it's not. Completely legal. Shelby, to finish off with. Everyone thinks Shelby is guilty. Well, at least all my friends do. And I'm still 99% there, guys. Not 100 though. She comes out last week and runs 4:20 for the mile indoor on her own, basically dominating. Splits 4:03 solo indoor. Indoor is not faster than outdoor. Although maybe this was at BYU, which would be. Either way. 403 split. Her best is 354. She did it on her own early season, not doping. You have to assume she's not doping now. That's the assumption I'm making. I've got a question. What's going to happen if she comes out and wins the world champs this year in 351? Now, that's probably not going to happen because Faith Yekipyegon and Sifan Hassan and others are going to make that very difficult. But what happens if she comes out of Diamond League and runs 350? Are people going... This is what I was saying last week. Are people going to say she's still doping now? Are people going to say, oh, the drugs she took in 2021 are still in her system? That's kind of the thing that some people are leaning on. I don't know if I buy that. I just don't know if that's how it works, even though there is... Look forward to me something that says that could work like that. My ARU friend wants to chip in here. Basically, not correcting me, but answering one of my questions from last week. Mr. S, listen to your podcast again. Firstly, he's talking actually about a different podcast. CEO Aki Numala has a very Finnish accent these days. Now he's first talking about... Because my ARU friend is quite close with Aki Numala, who I had on the podcast last week, who's the guy that basically... In fact, I would argue that Mr. ARU and Aki were the two that kind of roped me into the marathon to begin with. And I'm very thankful for that. But they kind of inspired me, even though Mr. ARU is not a marathoner. He was a very good middle distance runner. But anyway, CEO Numala has a very Finnish accent these days. Has it gotten worse? I thought he was more American earlier. Maybe he has started a rally driving career. Finnish rally drivers have shit accent. So it has called Rally English in Finland. Another note from a podcast episode. Yes, athletes remain subject to testing when they are serving a period of eligible, i.e. a ban. Eligibilite, sorry. Wow, I've never heard that word. Eligibilite. You know what I'm trying to say. They can retire, of course, but the downside is that if you retire, the ban is not running. Oh. So if you want to return to sport, you will be remaining subject to testing for the duration of the ban, period. There we go. So I'm glad you said that. So yeah, she can't retire and come back. It doesn't work like that. That's obvious now. Kind of stupid I was even speculating that, wasn't it? So yeah, she's done her ban. She was tested. Did I share on the last podcast that I heard when I finished the last podcast, I put it live. Yeah, I wouldn't have shared this. I put it live, and within 1 hour, someone emailed me, even though the podcast is an hour long, within an hour of me publishing it, someone goes, hey, Matt, Shelby's been tested 21 times. The Coffee Club guys shared that. I was like, wow, you listened to that quick. Maybe you listened on like 3x speed. I wonder what I sound like on 3x speed. That'd be painful. Oh, imagine my accent with like even 2x speed. That'd be brutal. Anyways, back to this. So she was tested 21 times. Was it 21 or 18? It was 18 or 21 times in the period, and she is cleared all those tests. She's now running. She's been tested constantly, and she's ripping 403 split for the 1500, which is not that far off a PB. I've got the popcorn, guys. Like, this is going to be an interesting thing to see play out, because if she dominates this year, and from everything we're seeing, she very well might. She might win. She's heading down the path from what I can see of winning US champs potentially, and then going to world champs, maybe doing very well. What are we going to think then? Is there ever going to be a point? Like, what happens if she comes out and wins the world champs this year? Are we gonna double down on this and go dopa, or are we gonna go, wait, these facts kind of don't line up very well? The fact that she's now clean, I mean, look, my assumption there with the story is that she gets the world champs, she wins them, and she passes all the tests, and there's no problems, right? That's going to be a weird thing. If that's the path this goes down, and let me be clear, I know the odds of that happening are probably 1 in 1,000, maybe 1 in 10,000, so very unlikely. But if that happens, that's going to cause some very interesting conversations, and you're going to see people go one of two ways. You're going to see people double down and hate her more. In my eyes, that's very immature, because the facts are starting to appear like she may possibly have not been doping if she wins the world champs or runs something super quick or does something really impressive. Basically, if she does anything better than she's ever done before this year, if she achieves something, either runs a personal best or places higher than she ever has, that to me is a very interesting discussion. Even though you're never going to get anywhere with the discussion, it's just an interesting thing to think about. So there you go. Thank you, Mr. ARU. I really appreciate your insight there. And thanks everyone for listening in. It's 59 minutes on the clock. And speaking of Mr. ARU, he's done with his podcast. He's had enough. I'm switching off. I will be in Japan next week, recording the In My Opinion, where In My Opinion was born. It was born in Osaka, actually. Was it in Osaka? I think I might have said it was in Tokyo on a podcast, but it was in fact in Osaka that I started it. I can't remember what I did say, but I know for sure the answer is actually Osaka. I did because I rotated between Osaka and Tokyo quite a bit last year. But I definitely launched in Osaka in a hotel room. So I will be in a hotel room in Osaka doing, in my opinion, number 26 next week. I'll be talking about the travel and all that jazz and some plans for Osaka Marathon. Looking forward to it. Get into the onsens. Google a Japanese onsen. They are probably the greatest thing on earth. I love them. I got kicked out of one last year because I had a small tattoo on my back. That was very humiliating. But other than that, they have been such an awesome experience. But anyway, that's enough from me. Thanks everyone for listening in. Join us on the Discord channel. Please do. I'd love to see you over there. sweatelite.co/shareholders. And I will be back next week from Japan, having traveled with a suitcase of most of my stuff to live remotely for 4 months. We will check in next week and